You want me to put that on my Tudor?
Harry's wife. The dignified silence that slays Monty Shitshow. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Narcissists hate silence. Your silence means two things. You're not providing us with fuel, or very little. We perhaps might be gathering some of it from the nervous look in your eyes, or as you shift anxiously from foot to foot. But for instance, if you're on the telephone to us and there is silence, you're not providing us with fuel. Silence threatens our control because you're suggesting that we don't matter, because we don't merit responding to. If you don't reply to our message, you wound us. If you don't answer the phone when we call you, you wound us. If you walk away from us in silence when we ask something of you, demand something of you, you wound us. We hate your silence. And Harry's wife is no different. When she experiences the dignified silence that emanates from the royal family, it chews her up. It tells her that she does not matter. It tells her that she isn't important. It tells her that she's insignificant. It crushes her internally. And thus the narcissism comes rushing in to save her by igniting her fury and causing her to then respond in a manner to nullify the threat to control that's posed by this silence, and, of course, to seek out the life-affirming fuel from elsewhere. The silence continues from the royal family, and the Telegraph, through Camilla Tominey, states why the firm are in no rush to reconcile. Visitors to Clarence House would never guess that the king is barely on speaking terms with one of his darling boys. Photographs of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and their children continue to adorn the king and queen's private quarters, facade management, alongside other cherished images from the royal family album. Under the circumstances, you might think that the pictures would be moved, but they've still got pride of place, confirms a guest at a recent royal gathering. To all outward appearances, they still seem to be a very happy family. Yet with both the King and the Prince of Wales having failed to officially acknowledge the recent birthdays of Archie, who turned 4th on Coronation Day in May, and Lilibet, who celebrated her second birthday on June the 4th, royal relations remain at an all-time low. Some of the frostiness between father and younger son seemed to have thawed in the lead-up to the coronation, with one well-placed insider describing a newfound spirit of genuine cooperation between Buckingham Palace and the Sussexes as Prince Harry planned his attendance at the historic ceremony at Westminster Abbey. But when he finally landed in London for what he had acknowledged was the biggest day of his father's life, he had no contact with the King or the Prince of Wales, leaving less than 48 hours after he'd arrived. He was also snubbed by both father and brother when he returned to Britain to attend the High Court in March and again earlier this month as part of his ongoing war against the media. Having pulled off a successful coronation and even managed to persuade the public to accept Queen Camilla, there is only one more pressing conundrum for the firm to grapple with: how to solve a problem like Prince Harry. Now, note, of course, and this is my observation, that it makes reference to solving a problem like Prince Harry, not solving a problem that is Harry's wife. Because the expertly advised royal family now realise that the way to solve the problem that is Harry's wife is to do nothing in relation to her. Never to respond to her provocations, never to respond to her jibes, never feel the need to contradict her contradictions. Do not respond. Do not react. You see, whilst the Sussexes may be impatient for an apology, and Harry's wife has no patience and she believes that she's entitled to that apology, their royal relatives appear in no hurry whatsoever to bury the hatchet. The emergence of a letter, Hoover, Assertion of Control, written by Harry's wife to the king expressing her concerns about unconscious bias in the royal family, seemed to have put paid to any imminent hope of reconciliation. As the Daily Telegraph reported in April, the correspondence was sent in the wake of the March 2021 Oprah Winfrey interview, in which the Duchess alleged that a member of the royal family had speculated about the colour of her unborn son's skin. Sources close to Harry's wife says that she feels that she has not received a satisfactory response to her concerns. In other words, the silence that has emanated from much of the royal family threatens her sense of control and translates, for her, to believe that she has not received a satisfactory response, and that in turn is one of the reasons why she did not attend the coronation, which is her seeking to nullify the threat to control posed by the lack of response. According to one source, the royals were only just coming to terms with the Oprah interview when the publication of Spare, Harry's tell-all autobiography, in January took everything right back to square one. There's a high sense of irritation about everything that they've done. The Netflix documentary was viewed as largely anodyne and nothing much to worry about. It's the book that, for the family, has really cemented the view that all Harry ever seems to want to do is air in unhappiness. Referring to Harry's suggestion that there was enough for another book, that he cut the memoir in half to spare his family, the insider added, "There's not a lot of trust left to allow the family to maintain a good and open relationship. How do you speak openly without it ending up in Volume 2, or indeed Harry's wife's memoirs, when the time inevitably comes?" And of course, the right answer is to remain silent, to not provide anything to them, because a response provides fuel, a response provides validation, and of course, a response will only be utilised by the narcissist that is Harry's wife, and to turn it against the royal family in some way. Harry's wife sticks to the narrative that the press are in cahoots with the palace, that constantly briefs against them, paranoia. One of the reasons you haven't heard a peep from the King or the Prince of Wales, explains one aide, is because the couple in California are incredibly sensitive about briefing to the media. They hate it. So people at the palace are having to be punctilious in refusing to speak in any way about the relationship. They're maintaining a no-contact regime. They're staying silent in relation to Sussexes. An irony, perhaps, when you consider just how many beans have been spilt by the Sussexes about their nearest and dearest. But of course, one royal's briefing is another royal's truth, in inverted commas. The fact is that silence, a dignified silence, is now given towards the Sussexes. And Harry's wife hates this. It invalidates her. It's exactly the right response. It is so tempting, of course, to want to turn to that person and point out why they're wrong, to try and get them to see, to tell other people about how that person is wrong. But all of those things ultimately only cause further problems. You end up giving the narcissist fuel, which is what we want. The narcissist is not going to accept what you say because it's a threat to control. The narcissist is hardwired not to accept it. And you're just wasting your breath, getting upset and frustrated. You kick the hornet's nest. The more you talk about the narcissist and their poor behaviour, the more the narcissist has to fight against it. And you would invite the narcissist then coming after you. Although it can be difficult to do, and at first it feels less satisfying, the most effective thing that you can do is maintain that dignified silence, because we absolutely hate it. Harry's wife cannot stand the fact that the royal family don't respond to her anymore. She stamps a cloven hoof. She hisses and rants. "Why won't they acknowledge me?" And turns on Harry. "They're your family. Make them respond." But they won't. They have been given, or rather they have been given, that particular tool of silence and of wielding it most effectively, and it's driving Harry's wife nuts. she will be shrieking in Monty's shit show when the latest attempt to get them to notice her results in this: silence. It infuriates her. It enrages her. It causes her to feel weak and powerless. She must be acknowledged. The marvellous Harry's wife, the amazing Harry's wife, all must recognise her and do so favourably. And when there is a failure to do so, it affronts her, it offends her. It makes her feel weak and powerless. And it's the same for any narcissist confronted by silence. Some, of course, are far more effective at dealing with it, able to coax out a response with charm and wit. But for Harry's wife, she acts like the Wicked Witch of the West having water thrown upon her. It burns. It stings. And I would encourage you now, as part of explaining how the dignified silence slays Monty's shit show, that you listen to what silence does to the narcissist so that you gain an understanding of precisely the hell that it causes for Harry's wife. Here it comes. This is what silence does to the narcissist. Silence wounds. If you are completely silent, the absence of your response wounds the narcissist. The important thing, however, is it must be a complete absence. If you are sat with the narcissist, and you're looking at the narcissist, and you perhaps have been asked a question, and you sit in silence, that does not wound us. Why? You are actually still giving us fuel. Try as you might, the look in your eyes will in effect betray you and give us fuel. You can't control that. You can't go mackerel eyes on us. The dead eye is ours, not yours. You will demonstrate a particular facial expression. You might try and look completely neutral, but you can't achieve that. Yes, you may stay stock still, so your body language doesn't necessarily convey anything. You may not be saying anything, so there are no words to fuel us, no tone to fuel us. But your facial expression, and even if somehow you manage to control that, the look in your eyes means that we will receive some fuel from you. And therefore, silence given to us in person doesn't wound. It amounts to the provision of challenge fuel. So if you are silent in our presence, you will give us some fuel from the look in your eyes and most likely your facial expression. And of course, sometimes you can't help but move or gesture, which again provides us with some fuel even though you're not saying anything. But we are fueled. Of course, you challenge us. Your silence, your failure to answer our question, your failure to give us affirmation, confirmation, validation through the spoken word challenges us. And in such circumstances, that infuriates and results in the narcissist shifting to a more sustained form of devaluing behavior, possibly, in certain instances, offering more of a benign behavior, bribing you, flattering you to try and provoke a response. But usually, your silence will result in the response of the narcissist being malign, because you're threatening our control, and you are not allowed to do that. The provision of silence in person always amounts to challenge fuel for the reasons that I have explained. And we hate it. Of course, the unaware narcissist doesn't realize that it's threatening their control. They hate it because they think that you're being ignorant, that you're being rude, that you ought to give an answer. And they don't realize that it's linked to the issue of threatening their control, and reducing, but not extinguishing, the provision of fuel. The aware, greater, and ultra is consciously aware that you are threatening our control, and therefore our manipulation is adjusted to enable us to assert control over you and gain fuel by making you speak by whatever means is appropriate for us to do so. Thus, silence in person challenges the narcissist and results in the application of a direct manipulation, i.e. the direct assertion of control against you. If that fails to gain the requisite control, then the narcissist will shift to indirect assertion of control and ultimately withdrawal, walking away from you, flipping an insult your way and departing, flouncing, storming out, or just walking away. We always gain that control. If your silence is where you are removed from us, where we send a text message to you and you fail to reply, where an email is sent and there is no response given, where we ring you on the telephone, you don't answer, where we turn up knocking at your door and you don't answer the door, where you are physically removed from us and our attempt at communication with you is met by nothing than silence, then we are wounded. Dependent upon the nature of the failure to reply, the failure to respond, dependent upon the nature of the silence, the extent of the wounding will vary. If you fail to respond to a text message, the wounding is minor in nature. But if you don't answer your front door to us, or if you walked away from us without looking at us, saying anything, then that would cause substantial wounding to the narcissist. If you shriek and run away from the narcissist out of fear, you've given us fuel, and the response is challenge fuel. But if you act as if we aren't there and just walk away, that causes substantial wounding to the narcissist. The narcissist, of course, is likely to respond by saying something to provoke you into returning, issuing a plea, a pity play, a threat, an insult, or maybe even dangling something shiny in front of you in order to try and assert control. But if you keep on walking, that silence continues to wound the narcissist. And ultimately, the narcissist will withdraw, seek fuel elsewhere, and basically assert control over you by smearing you elsewhere, or reaching the conclusion of what a rude individual she is, or he's scared of me, and that's why he ran away. If you show fear, you give us fuel. But if you don't, the narcissist will, in certain instances, think that you're frightened, but that is only part of the assertion of control. And the most effective thing that you can do to wound a narcissist, and of course to protect yourself more importantly, is to remove yourself from the narcissist. To not stand there and engage in idle banter or chit-chat or pleasantries, but it is to walk on by. It is to not open the door. Of course, you shouldn't have been receiving a text message in the first place, because you should be in no contact, ditto emails and social media messages. But if that were to occur, and there's a telephone call or a text message, your failure to respond wounds the narcissist. It is the extent of the wounding, which varies dependent upon the method of communication. We, however, as a general rule, hate your silence. It will either challenge or wound us. It will threaten our control. It suggests that we are unimportant, insignificant, lacking in power, that we don't matter. And although the lesser and mid-range narcissist will interpret it in terms of you being frightened, or you being rude, or ignorant, or dismissive, as all part of the narcissistic perspective and their lack of awareness as to what is really going on, they still will not like it, even if they don't know the real reason for why they don't like it. And they will be moved to assert control. They will feel the absence of that fuel. The fuel levels start to dip, and dependent upon what pre-existing fuel levels were, that may well be that the presence of the creature in the chasm becomes more apparent. Of course, if the fuel levels were relatively high to begin with, the silence causes a reduction in fuel, but doesn't send the narcissist anywhere near to hearing the catcalling and the wailing and the whisperings of the creature. Where you wound, not only are you not providing fuel, you are positively reducing the levels at an alarming rate, as occasioned by the effect of the wounding. And if you want to understand more about that, then you need to ensure that you read my book, Fury. If your silence is in person, then of course you are not going to be able to resist providing us some fuel for the reasons that I've explained, and therefore the problem there is all about the issue of control. Whereas if you wound, because your silence comes from a position whereby you're physically removed from us, not only is it the case that you will wound us, but you're not providing us with any fuel either. And therefore, absent silence, where we expect a response to something that we have done, is one of the worst things that you can do to the narcissist, and causes the narcissist to feel weakened, unimportant, neglected, invalidated. And those feelings will manifest in terms of annoyance, irritation, frustration, and of course, ultimately, the ignition of fury, whether heated or cold. Silence is a weapon that we use often against you. It is also a very good defensive tool that you ought to utilize, arising from your no-contact regime, not as a purposeful step to wound the narcissist, but as a collateral consequence of the maintenance of your no-contact regime. Embrace that silence. Or, as a particular band once sang, enjoy the silence. Utilize it as part of your no-contact regime to protect yourselves. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.